Welcome everyone to the World Health Network Town Hall on the bird flu. Today we have Eric Feigl-Ding and Crystal Burke with us. Crystal Burke, you can continue your introduction. Thanks.
Um, so basic background is trying to go to vet school, first degree in population health, animal health, dairy sciences, and herd health management. And I also worked as a veterinary technician in small, exotic, and large animal practices, including doing emergency room work and eventually working in a specialty hospital. So we had a neurologist, immunologist, and a bunch of other specialties. And when I still lived out in the Washington, Idaho area, we actually had a coronavirus mutation that killed off 50% of our canine patients. If they entered our hospital, even just a few steps inside, we could expect a phone call from them, from at least most of them, letting us know their animal needed hospitalized or had passed. Um, so when the coronavirus, and then I went to another grad school program, and my background there is in reproductive sciences, and I now work in genetics. Um, but when the COVID pandemic began, I already had that background with a coronavirus mutation that became highly lethal for the patients that infected, and watching what happened to those patients and their symptomology. And I unfortunately not unfortunately for this part, I have a child with Down syndrome who needed upper airway surgery, and we ended up actually getting infected from her airway surgeon. And so I'm a long hauler from March 2020, Friday the 13th, March 2020. And I am now an active advocate I've already been an advocate in the disability space, but I've now added to that the long COVID community and run multiple states for C19 Long Haulers Advocacy Project and work with a whole bunch of other groups, trying to promote health and keep us safe and try to decrease spread of coronavirus and other diseases.
Well, that's incredible work, and you've had incredible experiences and direct experiences, some sounding pretty frightening. So we're really happy that you're able to come and speak to H5N1 today. And if folks have questions to start with, they can go ahead and drop a couple in the chat. I'll pass it over to Eric to kick us off on the latest with H5N1.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks, Crystal. Oh gosh, where do we even begin with bird flu this week? I personally think we're at some interesting tipping point. I'm not gonna go holy mother of God yet, but there's been a series of interesting developments. Some of you who've seen my posts about the obviously right before the Trump transition, the CDC put out one of its last health alerts, I think on the 17th of January, for nationwide subtyping of flu A to see if it is bird flu in all hospitalized flu A cases. So basically, they're telling everyone identify if the flu is flu A or flu B, the common flu types. And then if flu A, aggressively subtype immediately within 24 hours if it's bird flu. And, no comment about the capacity to do this, but they said, get nationwide tested. And this kind of like went under the radar. And only recently did states also issue this memo because this testing, of course, for bird flu is very limited. So states didn't know how to comply with this. And now New York State put out this memo, Minnesota put out, I think California did as well, about hospitals needing to submit flu A cases to labs. And if you don't know the subtype, type it right away. So basically there's this aggressive nationwide testing. And I think that's very interesting because previously you were doing random milk testing in most states as part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture program. And then we have bird flu testing of bird flocks and cows testing various cattle, but we've never done like nationwide human testing, and this is the first nationwide human testing like recommendation. Again, no capacity to support this, but every state's kind of like on their own. But I think that's very troubling. And since then, of course, CDC has issued nothing. And yesterday, you may have heard about CDC posted an MMWR report on bird flu transmission in two households between a cat and a human, and a human and a cat. So cat to human transmission and human to cat transmission in the household. And that was kind of very interesting. And then quickly it was pulled. So that actually got a lot of headlines. So we've also known that there's human transmission. And I think that recently we also, just the other day, earlier, like on January 31st, it wasn't reported much, but they found that in the cows, which remember, you can get flu from raw milk, right? These bird flu from raw milk. But of course, we pasteurize mostly, and pasteurization is mostly okay. Let's just not get there because I don't want to scare people. But definitely avoid raw milk. But we found that they found the first ever D1 subtype of avian flu. D1 is the one that's like the most aggressive. D1.1 is the one that was found previously in the Vancouver teenager who was hospitalized for like a week. D1.1 is also the variant found in the dead Louisiana man in much further later. And there's no connections between the Louisiana man and the Vancouver teenager. The dead Louisiana man, the CDC said was, he had a flock of birds in his backyard. Some of the birds died. The birds had bird flu, but it wasn't the D1.1. So this is kind of like interesting. Think about, okay, if the man got it from the birds in his backyard, but the birds in the backyard didn't have D1.1, but so the CDC then concluded that the man developed D1.1, the virus evolved to D1.1 inside the man's body, like the virus adapted. But then again, D1.1 is also what was found in the Vancouver teenager, and there's no connection between that Louisiana man and the Vancouver teenager. So I was talking to Rick Bright, well-regarded virologist and bird flu expert, and he thinks this is like a case of convergent evolution. It's almost like when we know something is advantageous, right? An advantageous mutation, and the virus evolves in that direction independently from several separate directions without any admixture or anything. So this is one of those things where there's no connections, and then they both developed the virus, both adapted in humans to D1.1 and got one hospitalized, a healthy teenager, and then killed the other man who was over the age of 65. And this is the strain that's now been discovered in milk, in I think a Nevada dairy herd or something like that. But if it's in these dairy herds, you've seen how these dairy herds gets all out of control. I think that's kind of really fascinating. And now this I'm going to call it pretty dangerous strain, D1.1, is now in dairy milk. So I really hope the raw milk drinkers are listening and stop drinking it, or at least please pasteurize. But we haven't seen like widespread spread, but like the clues are there. And also, by the way, in the New York memo that was issued recently as a follow-up to the CDC memo, it reiterated CDC's recommendation for nationwide hospitalized bird flu testing of all hospitalized cases and subtyping of them. But it's also advocating for, negative pressure rooms where these hospitalized bird flu cases are. It's also advocating for masking, HEPA filters. But if you think about it, why are they recommending, negative pressure air masking, HEPA filters in these hospitalized cases? It's because they believe in human-to-human transmission, right? Yeah. Because I think that's the implication. So I think there's lots of clues you can pick up of where this is going, and it's not looking good. So I think this acceleration, especially now that we've identified a dangerous human version, a dangerous version of this that's really harmful to humans, I think that's the worrisome thing. And I feel like the virus is kind of like primed now to really go big in humans. We just don't have much testing. I think that's why the CDC issued that testing recommendation right before the calm lights went out once the Trump transition hit.
Yeah, so
But welcome people's thoughts.
yeah, so there was a question, where can the human data on this be found, considering the national CDC having limitations?
So there is still CDC still has the ILI reports. The ILI is the influenza-like illness reports. They're a little bit outdated. They're like I think 2 weeks behind, 1.5 to 2 weeks behind now. But I think the January 25th ILI is out. And it's bad. And so there's reports also of like schools being closed across the country, and 41 states out of 50 having high or very high levels of flu. So we don't have the bird flu data, and I'm assuming I'm not going to count on the CDC publishing them anytime soon,
We have
right?
bits of data though, coming through APHIS.
Yeah.
So, sorry, all of the animal background stuff, I can actually add a bit more info
Okay,
to
great.
because I'm on the farm side. So I still talk to a lot of, I used to work in a dairy testing lab and run around a bunch of cattle collecting samples and doing a vaccine trial. And so they're actually doing, uh, bird flu testing in cattle in Colorado. And he said that the numbers he got from the state over a month ago was that like 60% of the herds had been infected, but they were
Right.
officially announcing like 30 to the public. And his personal theory from all the dairy men that he talked to is that probably every herd in the state had at least a couple of bird flu cases. Um, and that there are a lot more workers sick than are being reported. And so like all of our numbers of there's over 100 humans that have been infected with the cattle variant,
Right.
and getting conjunctivitis and the minor upper respiratory symptoms.
Right.
His belief was that there's a whole lot more. And
Of
talking
course.
to veterinarians in California and across the Midwest, he was saying that they were seeing it there as well, but a lot of those states were not reporting because they didn't want to, under the former administration, like basically be reporting this problem, especially as the new administration was coming into term. So there's politics playing into at least
Right.
some of our reporting.
Well, yeah, I'm not forgiving the USDA under Biden, under Vilsack at all, because personally I don't really trust the USDA with reporting accuracy, because USDA is the Commerce Department of Agriculture, right?
And
So
USDA actually said that in an interview to, I think it's Dairy, what is it? It's Dairy Science Daily, Dairy Science. There's a Dairy Science magazine that like everybody in the association reads. And the USDA director said their job was to protect dairy as an industry
yeah,
more than to prevent infection
right,
across people and animals.
yeah,
So that is how their data was going to be focused.
right.
But with APHIS, we can see that, I don't remember the exact numbers. It was somewhere between 40 and 70% of songbirds that they caught in the netting experiments that they do in Utah were testing positive for bird flu.
Yeah. I think the issue is we're not doing enough subtyping. Like at this
Yeah.
point, it's obvious bird flu is everywhere across bird flocks. Hence the chicken culling and the egg prices and the dairy populations, herds. It's nationwide. I think that's pretty damn obvious. The issue is like, um, what right now with the D1.1, because the other ones are milder, hence we haven't seen the explosive human cases. Like if it truly was, because there's a lot of raw milk drinkers. If it truly was dangerous already, we would see raw milk drinkers like dropping left and right, being severely hospitalized. But we're not yet, because I think the strain hasn't been well adapted, right?
The cattle strain that's occurring right now can only infect certain cell types and
Right.
receptors. And currently
Exactly.
those are in our eyes, very
Yeah,
deep,
the conjunctivitis and the birds.
very deep in our
So
lungs.
the D 1.1 I think changes that. This D 1.1 announcement by the USDA, um, and again previously we didn't have nomenclature. Like the D 1.1 nomenclature wasn't even there for when the Vancouver case happened over like a month ago. And then when the Louisiana case happened, there wasn't almost there. They finally recently subtyped it. They subtyped it, and now they've come to this nomenclature D1.1. Now we have a name for the subclade. So, and now they recognize it that this D1.1 has been. This is D1.1 is the one is making me a little like some of the alarm bells going off because and I think the CDC knew, obviously they know these things internally already, right? For those who track it, they just couldn't like announce it because they don't really have data. I think this hence this nationwide testing. I honestly wish. So I think we should if you have flu, and I think a lot of people have flu these days. I think we need to know, if you're flu A or B, because there's home rapid tests for flu A or B. That's like $10 or $12 or something. And then if you have type A, I think there should be an aggressive movement to subtype it.
The CDC did actually call for that right before the inauguration, saying that every hospital across the state
Yeah,
across the country should be
yeah,
subtyping.
yeah. That's why I was saying
Okay.
too. But they but that's only hospitalized cases, which is very teeny tip of the iceberg, right? And I think in certain ways, if you don't know, like basically, I talked to some folks, they didn't even know about the CDC alert, right? They work in hospitals, and only if you're really, really, this was one of those really undersold alerts. Like, it should have been like a headline somewhere, but it wasn't until recently. Um, A, I don't think that. B, I think we right now, if especially if we have the capacity, and not many states have the capacity to do wide testing, subtyping. I think people should know at least if they have type flu, type A or B. So I think they should find out using these rapid tests if they're A or B subtype, and then become, more or less concerned about this. It just, this is one of those, if you don't test, see no evil, hear no evil, right? Um, and
The
this is an
other problem
ostrich.
I'm Sorry, the other problem I'm seeing with this is that they are often finding flu, and then not testing for anything else. So we are having people with co-infections of RSV, COVID, flu, and possibly multiple types of flu. And that is a huge risk for us because of the reassortment that flu does.
Right, right. The flu does reassort a lot faster than COVID does. The only thing is like, you know, reassortment between flu types happens more than say reassortment between flu and the coronavirus. So
Right,
that,
but coronavirus
yeah,
damages the immune system, making that more likely.
right, right, right. Look, these are all things that we, as in the precautionary community, are aware of. The issue is like getting this word out to the, you know, it's mild um, naysayers out there, right? Because in certain ways, we've kind of raised the alarm. There's headlines on the Today Show and like various local news that talk about, flu's nationwide, flu's bad, it's going everywhere, but it doesn't raise any of the naysayers' alarms because to convince them that this is real, and this is always one of those things where by the time they wake up to something, they'll only wake up to something to like a New York City level, March, April 2020 level of disaster, right? And only if they see it locally. And so I this is where like we have to raise the alarm. Like we've learned from our, failures and mistakes in the past, but we have to take this to the next level. And I think people should really, take greater stock and get prescriptions for Tamiflu and other antivirals. Um, because they actually said in the New York memo that if you have a suspected flu case, get on Tamiflu. Even before we subtype it, like get on Tamiflu, and they should get Tamiflu right away within 24 hours. But like, where's that? Like Hall, like Where's this nationwide call for people to get Tamiflu? We just don't have that. Because if you do have bird flu, you will definitely need uh, interventions because we don't have immunity against the D1 if it really is multi-systemic beyond just certain cell types.
Thanks. Yeah, so there's a couple questions in the chat about what to eat and concerns about meat and eggs, avoiding dairy, would and also questions about gardening, being concerned about droppings from any birds on a garden.
Right. Crystal, you want to take this one?
Yeah. So we have chickens and quail and ducks and goats and rabbits. I think I've got all the outside animals, and we have dogs and cats and fish inside. And as far as eggs go, the bird flu typically kills off chickens within 48 hours of infection. So they are not laying eggs that are going to be able to transmit, at least as far as we've found thus far, before they die. Like those aren't going to make it to market. And that's why we are doing the culling. So there's a lot of people with conspiracy theories that culling is because we're trying to make this current administration look bad. And it's because it's humane. Otherwise, chickens drown in their own lungs within 48 hours. So if you have a backyard flock, our pen is currently covered and has the sides covered, though we actually live surrounded by woods instead of open fields. So we don't have the problem that some places do of large geese flocks living in the fields right next to their chicken pens, putting a lot of waste there that on a hot day turns into aerosolized dust that then blows through their chicken coop or their dairy yard or whatever. And that's one of the theories for why whole herds and whole chicken flocks are getting infected very rapidly. But these flus also very quickly transmit. At this point, pasteurization seems to be taking care of at least inactivating most of the virus that we're finding in milk. So while we can see signs of the inactivated virus in the milk on store shelves in some places, it does not appear at this point to be active, nor in the amounts that are likely to infect someone. If you want to take more care, you can home pasteurize your milk. When my goats come into milk, we will be pasteurizing all the milk that we get from them. And you can look up your local college, especially if you have an ag school, likely has an extension office or a farm extension office or some variant of that term that actually has directions for how to can food, how to pasteurize food. So you can do all of this at home safely. The big trick is you have to be able to sterilize all of your equipment so that you don't add in bacteria and other pathogens from your own home into your milk when you try to pasteurize it, because we don't want to cause other problems trying to solve another.
Thank you.
And cook your meat.
Thoroughly. Yes. Great.
Although for the meat, I do have a question. Isn't it that most of the bird flu is concentrated in the udders? The milk bladder,
Yeah, so
basically.
they found it in the cells that it can bind to most effectively are in similar places in the cow as into humans. We just don't tend to walk around with exposed lactating breasts versus a cow does. And these cows that are in milk are going into the exact same facility, all being handled by the same workers who might have caught bird flu and then transmit it again to the cows. But it is in their eyes, in their lower airways, and typically it's not getting there. It's typically staying in the udder, the more exposed.
So that's why I'm asking, like, for example, meat. Does the meat, if you're having steak, does it have
Have
to be well done,
tested
or is, if the surface cooked and you can still have medium rare?
meat has been tested and found to contain bird flu, not as commonly as they expected at first, but it is still being found. And so it is worth your time to clean and sterilize wherever you are going to put your meat when you're prepping it, and clean and sterilize when you're done. and cook well. Don't raw beef and chicken right now is not a good choice.
No, I
So there's
get
more,
that.
thanks guys. There's more questions specifically about navigating around outdoor areas. So for example, there's a photographer that, you know, is concerned about being around droppings. Should those areas just be avoided? Yeah.
If you can, I personally wear a N95 anywhere another human could be breathing, and if I'm going somewhere where there's a large flock, I'd be wearing an N95 outdoors as well.
Yeah.
And I would end up saying, like, especially if you have cats indoors, or especially if we start to see human to human transmission or more frequent human transmission, you should probably not wear your shoes inside your house anymore. I would take them off outside your door. If you have a mud room or a front porch or something you can leave them on, great. If you can't do that because you live somewhere like we do where it's freaking cold out, then you can, something that dairy workers are supposed to do is actually sanitize your boots or shoes every time you come in and out of the house. And that might change what shoes you wear in public. And like try to keep them in a contained area near the door so that they are not tracking manure throughout your house.
And then what about swimming in a lake come this summer?
We've had outbreaks of bad bacteria in all of my local lakes, so that hasn't been available for me for the last few years. So I haven't done anything other than not do that for the last couple of years anyway, so I'm not sure I have a good answer.
I think lakes are still probably okay. There is another motto in public health. I don't like to cite it too often, but it's a sad motto, and it's the solution to pollution is dilution. And you know, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, we cleaned up some, but where did most of the oil go? It was diluted away into the ocean. Like I think these concentrations are still low on the grand scheme. It's just if you have direct contact, that's when the exposure is the most dangerous. I don't think lake swimming is going to be the issue. There's lots of other problems with swimming in lakes besides bird flu. I don't think the virus can survive that long. But I think people need to stock. I think the message should be people need to figure out what flu they have. Advocate to get tested, subtyped if they know it's flu A via rapid test, and I think they should stockpile up on Tamiflu and other antivirals if they can. They're available by prescription. That's the thing. You have to have a family doctor or nurse practitioner that's willing to prescribe it for your family members, almost like as soon as you can, or prophylactically if they're able and willing to do that. So, I think our nationwide supply of Tamiflu is not that high. I think people need to just really be on lookout. If we can't warn everyone, you should really protect your family and have it on hand, because they work only at the earliest within 48 hours of the onset of symptoms. They don't really work, once the disease gets more progressed. And personally, hospitalized cases is already very progressed.
There's also some evidence that Tamiflu is less effective against some of the more hazardous strains of bird flu.
Yeah, we just don't know. There's several antivirals. The issue is we don't really know, in detail, how they respond, and right now something is better than nothing. Like we don't have monoclonal antibodies, right, for bird flu. Technically, by the way, other countries, and you can tell me, Crystal, other countries vaccinate their chickens against bird flu, right?
My understanding is that the US is one of the few countries that decided not to do that.
Right.
It's easier to cull than it was to vaccinate our birds. And yeah. And so there's a lot of farmers and veterinarians that are upset about this because this whole entire situation could potentially have been blocked.
No. Long term, I can see it's cheaper to not vaccinate every year But I think in a bird flu outbreak situation, they should have done this starting last summer, because we knew it was like spreading among bird populations already. So, anyways,
Yeah.
that's
We do have some public health alerts going up on our website that we're regularly updating. So I know folks were asking in the chat, like, where can I get information? We know that the CDC reports are delayed at best, and different states are doing various levels of reporting. And I know there was some mention of different accounts, social media accounts that folks follow in the chat, so you could scan through there. I'm not going to endorse anyone in particular, but you guys are crowdsourcing together, which is helpful. But we do have one. I just put the link in the chat. And I also put the California and New York state advisories on H5N1, so you can check those links out for more detailed information, like regarding what procedures should be followed, so you can advocate for yourself while you're at the doctor and push for sequencing after you get a flu A positive. I'm not sure if you guys know, Eric or Crystal, like if there were some questions about, could you only get that sequenced in a hospital? I know from personal experience, like I was at an urgent care clinic and they were able to send off something. I had my son tested for whooping cough and they did send that off to the state. So I know that like some urgent cares can send
they
things.
will PCR test.
Yeah.
Yes, the states will PCR test for H5N1. That they can. But the subtyping for D1.1 requires sequencing, the genome sequencing beyond just PCR. This is where our capacity just falls down, right? Because very few labs have sequencing capacity to do that, to find the subclade,
Yeah.
and that this is where, even remember during COVID where it was too expensive to sequence, but there was clearly the alpha variant, the UK variant of what they were first called, and there was somehow there was a PCR shortcut, right? There was a shortcut test that they almost discovered by accident because in this PCR test, one of the two signals didn't light up, but it lit up that it was COVID, but the other signal didn't light up. There was basically indicated it was this variant. So this is, but that was like a pure fluke. So unless we find like a shortcut PCR test, we won't be able to know.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah. Been helpful. Yep. So Mia also had a question about uh there's a couple
Can
questions here.
I, real quick, while you're looking for that, someone posted in the chat that they buy lactose-free milk, which means it's ultra pasteurized, and that's not necessarily the case. If it's ultra pasteurized, it'll actually say ultra pasteurized on the container. Lactose-free just means that they added the same ingredient that's in Lactaid milk.
Yeah.
To
Hi, this is Mia. Yeah, it does say ultra pasteurized. That's why I
yeah.
buy
So
it.
if it says ultra pasteurized, you're good. But just because it's lactose-free doesn't necessarily.
No, what I meant to say was I buy that at Costco. The lactose-free milk at Costco is ultra pasteurized. That gives me some, comfort in knowing that it's been super cleaned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. What would you guys like to quickly answer, like what is the difference between ultra pasteurized and pasteurized? Folks might not know that difference.
Pasteurization takes time and temperature. And so most of our pasteurization is done at a relatively low temperature pretty quickly because they've done a whole ton of research on this and they had us repeat it during my master's program to prove that we could kill off basically 99.97% of all bacteria and other pathogens in the milk at this temperature, flash cooking it for 15 seconds. If you're doing it at home, you cannot reach that temperature and cool it that fast because you don't have the $1 million pasteurization facility that it requires to do this. So instead, you can end up doing a higher temperature to make sure that you are clearing it completely, but that can make your milk taste different, which some people can't tolerate. Or you can do it for a lot longer at a lower temperature so that that way everything, all the proteins that are in those pathogens get a chance to break down. And like I said, the directions for those are for both ultra pasteurization and regular pasteurization. You can find at your local extension office.
Thank you.
I think the main issue is that the people who need to hear "don't drink raw milk" are not here today with us in this our audience. So I think we need to kind of like spread it in our networks. You know, everyone has their own local networks to say, you know, there's a deadlier version, the more dangerous version of bird flu, the D1.1, that killed a man in Louisiana and hospitalized a healthy teenager with no underlying conditions. And you know, the teenager was hospitalized for a week. And this variant, new variant, is new. It's not just what's been floating around. It's new, and it's now in milk herds. And so now going forward, because they'll say, well, I've been drinking raw milk for the last couple months, years. I've never gotten sick, blah, 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 blah. You need to emphasize this is new. We've now discovered this the more dangerous, deadlier version now. This is something new. Because I think people like, they're always like, well, how come I never blah, blah, blah before, right? That's always what they say. But they say, but you need to tell them, you know, things have changed. This is a new thing. And I think that's what will, you know, hopefully get them out of their, you know, old, you know, but that's how I always did it kind of mentality.
The other option for that is also to say, like, Pluto has been in existence the entire time there has been humans on planet Earth. We didn't discover it until 1930. It was always there. And just because right now we have bird flu getting into our milk doesn't mean that it wasn't always a problem we should have been watching. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but then they'll just being a devil's advocate, knowing how they think, they'll say, well, how come we haven't had people dropping left and right of drinking from raw milk? Because in their mind, they need to see a New York City March, April 2020 situation. That in their mind, that's their threshold of holy shit has hit the fan. Maybe I should actually take things more seriously. Obviously, you know, by the time any epidemic reaches that level, we've like really just, you know, completely lost control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as someone who had a cow and has dairy goats and has used raw milk to make cheese and has drank it myself, like, I also test my animals every single time that I'm using their milk raw. And this year, even if they test clean, I'm not willing to do it this year because they could get infected at any time. When I knew that I had a herd that was completely closed and protected from the worst pathogens that could get to me, that was an acceptable risk.
Yeah.
But I was also
Actually, yeah,
every
Crystal, I
single
think you should actually say this. You should somehow tweet this or post this. As a raw, you know, as someone who owns a farm and used to drink raw milk, dear raw milk drinkers, as someone who used to drink raw milk, I don't do it anymore starting now because da 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 da.
starting last year, but yeah.
I know, but especially you should say, especially
Yeah.
starting now, given what we know, this is why things have changed. You know, it's just like because this is the kind of message. You know, it's like you need a messenger from their community as opposed to an epidemiologist who's always fear mongering in their eyes, right?
The other part of this is like a lot of the people who are in that raw milk community are there because they have problems for some reason or another with the commercial milk that's coming out. Either they have an allergy to the milk that comes out of Holstein cattle. There's a histone related protein that can end up causing a lot of havoc for a lot of people. And so they've moved to raw milk because that normally comes from Jerseys and Blue Swiss and others that have that A2 subtype. Or there are people in the chronic illness community who have either been sucked in by woo or genuinely found something that helps them in that raw milk. But right now the risk is so high that whatever benefits they think they're getting are no longer worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
Could you like leaning into this, as a former raw milk drinker, I don't drink anymore. Could you like maybe like give out tips like, hey, if you buy raw milk, good for you, but starting now, you should boil it for 5 minutes. Like, what's the home equivalent?
So I actually bought an Instapot that has a pasteurization setting, just so I don't have to think about it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
But
And
if they don't have that Instapot, I don't know how much it costs. Some people buying new stuff is always an active.
yeah.
Could you tell them, get a pot, pour the milk in, boil it to boiling, and hold it for 30 seconds? Like, what is the simplest?
Literally, the best thing to do is send them to their local extension agency or their local ag agency, because they've got the step-by-step directions broken down with images. And
Yeah, people are not going to do that.
for how to tool it, how to cool it.
I'm being a lazy person right now with you. The local ad agent, they're not going to do that. Just someone who just wants to drink their raw milk. They don't want to look up the government websites because they don't trust government, whatever, for whatever reason. And can you
The
just give them like,
laziest-
what's a good safety thing? Like boil it.
Laziest answer is heat it up until you start to see it foam around the edges, and then cool it. It'll change the flavor of the milk, but that is warm enough,
Okay,
as long as you're stirring your pot, to
Okay.
end up killing off any pathogens that are in
that's great. I think that would solve, I think 95% of the problem, just to get people.
it. So when I had raw milk all the time at my house, whenever we had visitors, the only milk I would serve them from my house was either bought from the store or I would make them hot cocoa. Those are their
Yeah.
choices. They don't get
Right.
to drink my raw milk because they're not used to it, and I don't want to give them anything that they.
Right. No, that's great advice. That's great advice. Okay, until it foams. We should put out a memo, Katie.
Yeah. Yeah, I was also looking, I put in the California Department of Public Health quick sheet, and I read it yesterday, and I thought they had said they had specified a certain degree.
Yep. Yeah, but if you get up to that point where you're starting to get the foam around the edges, you are just below boiling. So if you don't have a thermometer, if you are too lazy to figure out how to do anything else but watch your pot,
Sure.
that is the quick and dirty. Is once you start to get those bubbles around the edges, you are over 150 Fahrenheit and you're good to go.
Okay.
And you've got ultra pasteurized milk at that point.
Great. Well, yes, we will. I will talk to Crystal about making an advisory of such. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was
I think we should, let's announce it, because I don't think anybody else has posted. I don't think any state have posted this, right? We should just say, raw milk advisory. It's almost like a boiling water advisory, boiling milk advisory.
And
right?
and for the person in the chat, microwaving is not enough. It inconsistently heats your milk, so it won't work. Like, you will get pockets of cold and hot, and so it's not enough to even deal with a single cup unless you get it well beyond boiling. So lots of people don't necessarily want their entire microwave covered in foamed milk. That's just for their microwave.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there was a question about, I think the difference between getting sick, the virus passing from bird to person, or oh yeah, here it is. So Vanessa said, can you discuss the possibility of or known cases of songbird to human transmission, chicken to human, or dairy to human?
So that I can actually help with this. The
Great.
Louisiana case, at least the way they're spreading it through the ag and veterinarian community, is that individual had contact with both wild birds that were infected and with his local flock. And it sounds like he picked up a dead wild bird on his property and then went and took care of his chickens and then became sick.
This is the Louisiana man?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's at least the story that's being shared in ag circles.
Mm. But he has a different strain. So what's
So
unique?
what they're saying when they sequenced it is that he had a different strain from both of his chickens and the wild birds that he had
Right.
contact with, and it proves that it mutated inside of his body.
Right. I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which is interesting because it's not like, you know, it like mutated in the birds and crossed over. It adapted in his body. It's just like we've seen it with COVID. It adapted within a person to be more infectious, able to survive. And if it happened just like with one case, and I don't think this person had
But they saw
HIV
it
or
in
anything.
the British Columbia case as well. I think
Right.
they said he had like he had some sort of like chronic condition like diabetes or
Right.
something.
But the teenager didn't. The
The
British Columbia.
teenager, they said her only thing was she was obese.
Yeah, but a
Yeah.
teenager, that's still pretty healthy, you know. So I think this is where like the virus is adapting and pretty quickly, you know, because previously we know that this mutation definitely happens in immunocompromised. Basically, the person never quite defeats it, and the virus comes back adapted for another generation.
And the
And the
UK
person
now has a D1.1 case as well from last year.
really
Yeah.
was it in a human case, de
Yeah.
novo, or yeah?
Yeah, I think they said that they thought there might be some wild bird contact, but it hadn't been verified last I saw.
Yeah. Well, I think that the independent, like, because the Vancouver case had the teenager had like no animal contact either, so it's not like, you know, this is where I'm saying like if it independently, this is where like Rick and I were saying this is kind of like convergent evolution, right? They're both going towards D1.1. Within two separate people. It's definitely like the directionality for human adaptation. This is proven human adaptation.
D1.1 is the more common wild bird variant, but when it gets into humans, it develops new mutations that allow it to adapt to mammalian cells.
Right. But for example, the the dairy, uh, if it was already very common, then why did the USDA just announce that they had the first dairy deep 1.1? I think that's
Right. No,
unique.
that's so the one that's been circulating in cattle has been, I think it's D3.2. I haven't looked it up for a couple days, but
Right.
it's a slightly different version that has an adaptation to mammalian cells, but a less virulent, a less harmful to us variant.
Right.
And it's
Right.
only adapted to a mammalian cell that we don't have very commonly throughout our bodies.
Right.
And so it really can only get through our eyes unless we breathe deeply enough to get it into low lungs, or it somehow gets past our digestive tract.
Yeah, which is harder because our digestive tract does break down a majority of proteins. So, anyways, we have to wait and see. But you know, we're literally in the dark until because there's no nationwide tabulation of these kind of things.
Well, thanks. We're gonna wrap up here. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Crystal. Thanks everyone who joined us today. Like I said, we are going to be posting public health alerts on our website. And if you're not already a part of the WHN member network, I'm going to put a link here. You can sign up for a welcome meeting. We have a large community that meets virtually online. We have meetings every day to get the most up-to-date information and learn about projects that are available if you're looking for community and opportunities to help out. Or possibly, I saw there was some folks in the chat with a lot of knowledge if you're interested in participating in future events or town halls. Please definitely sign up and get in touch with us. We'd love to work with you and get all this needed information out in this day and age. So again, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone at the World Health Network to help put this together. And I hope you all have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are calling in from. We're going to be posting this up on YouTube on our WHN YouTube account soon if you missed any part of it or want to share it. Thanks again, everybody. Take care.